For my 31st birthday, my mother-in-law handed me divorce papers wrapped in a bow. The elegant restaurant around us buzzed with the usual Friday night energy, but our corner table felt like it existed in its own twisted universe. From all of us, she announced with a smile that could have cut glass, gesturing to my husband Mark and his sister Jessica, who sat there recording my reaction on their phones like I was some kind of entertainment. I stared at the manila envelope peeking out from beneath the silver ribbon. The irony wasn't lost on me. Divorce papers as a birthday gift. Have you ever been underestimated by your in-laws? Because in that moment, as I looked at their expectant faces waiting for me to break down, I realized they had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. "Open it, Amanda," Mark said, his voice carrying that tone I'd grown to hate, the one that said he thought he was so much smarter than me. "We thought you'd appreciate the honesty." Though the camera kept rolling. They wanted to capture my humiliation, my tears, my desperate pleas for forgiveness. They expected me to beg. Instead, I smiled. Not the fake smile I'd perfected over 3 years of marriage, but a genuine one, because they had no idea what I'd already done. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady as I untied the ribbon. "This is actually perfect timing." I could see their confusion starting to creep in. This wasn't the script they'd written in their heads. My mother-in-law, Patricia Wilson, had always seen me as some gold-digging nobody who'd trapped her precious son. She'd made that clear from day one. What she didn't know was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of her for months. 3 months earlier, I'd found the lawyer's business card tucked behind Mark's credit cards. Jameson and Associates, divorce specialists. The edges were worn like he'd been carrying it around for a while, building up the courage. Or maybe just waiting for the right moment to maximize the damage. That night, while he slept beside me, probably dreaming about his freedom, I lay awake connecting the dots. The hushed phone calls, the sudden interest in guys' trips, the way he'd started asking pointed questions about my work schedule, my bank accounts, my savings. I realized they'd been building a case, probably hoping to paint me as an absent wife who contributed nothing to the marriage. If only they knew the truth. You see, when I married Mark Wilson 3 years ago, I wasn't the struggling waitress his family thought I was. I was Amanda Chen before I took his name. Yes, that Amanda Chen. The one who'd sold her tech startup to Microsoft for $42 million when she was 28. But I'd kept that quiet, wanting to know if Mark loved me or my money. Turns out he'd chosen option 3, use me while plotting to destroy me. So I started my own investigation. What would you do with a 3-month head start? I hired the best private investigator money could buy. I documented everything. The affair with his coworker Sarah, the credit card debt he'd hidden from me, the way he'd been slowly moving assets, thinking he was preparing for some massive payout. The beautiful thing was, legally, almost everything was mine. The house we lived in, I'd bought it cash and put only my name on the deed, though I'd let him believe we owned it together. The cars in our driveway, leased under my company, the credit cards he'd been using to fund his lifestyle and affair, all backed by my accounts, which meant I could revoke access any time I wanted. But I wasn't done. My attorney, the real one, not the free consultation Mark thought he was so clever for hiding, had smiled when I showed him the evidence. "Mrs. Wilson," he'd said, "by the time we're finished, they'll be begging you to take them back." Now, sitting in this overpriced restaurant 3 months later, watching them film what they thought was my destruction, I carefully opened the envelope. The papers were exactly what I'd expected. A standard no-fault divorce with a laughably one-sided asset division. They wanted the house, the cars, half my business assets, and alimony. They'd done their homework on what they thought I owned, but they'd missed the bigger picture entirely. I read through the papers slowly, letting them sweat. Jessica leaned forward, probably worried her video wasn't capturing enough drama. Mark kept glancing between me and his mother, like he was waiting for her approval. Patricia just sat there with that smug expression, probably already planning how she'd redecorate her house once I was gone. "This is very thorough," I said finally, setting the papers down. "You must have worked hard on this." I reached into my purse and pulled out my favorite pen, a Mont Blanc that had cost more than Mark made in a month. "Should I sign now, or did you want to give a speech first?" The confusion was spreading across their faces like spilled wine on white linen. This wasn't the reaction they'd scripted. Where were my tears? Where was my desperate bargaining? You're not going to fight this?" Mark stammered, lowering his phone slightly. "Fight what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You want a divorce. I'm giving you exactly what you want." I signed my name with a flourish on every page that required it. The irony was delicious. They had no idea they were signing away their own security. Because here's what they didn't know. Everything they thought they were taking from me was already gone. 3 weeks ago, I'd legally transferred ownership of the house to my sister. The cars had been returned to the leasing company. The bank accounts they'd been counting on closed, with every penny moved to institutions they'd never heard of. More importantly, I discovered that Mark's affair wasn't just emotional. He'd been funneling money to Sarah for months, thinking he was hiding it from me. But since it was technically my money he was stealing, my lawyer had already filed criminal charges. The papers would be served Monday morning. I finished signing and slid the documents back across the table. "There," I said, standing up and shouldering my purse. "Happy birthday to me, I guess." I looked around the table at their stunned faces. "Oh, and Patricia, that luxury birthday party you're planning for next weekend? You might want to check your credit limit first." And with that, I walked out of Chez Laurent, leaving them sitting there with their cameras and their confusion. Through the glass doors, I could see them frantically whispering to each other, probably trying to figure out what had just happened. They had no idea the real show was just beginning. The party Patricia had planned wasn't just any celebration. It was going to be her victory lap. She'd booked the most exclusive venue in the city, invited everyone who mattered in their social circle, and spared no expense on what she was calling Mark's Freedom Party. The guest list read like a who's who of local society. The country club crowd, Mark's business associates, their church group, even some of my former colleagues, who'd always wondered how a simple waitress had landed such a successful husband. She had no idea who was paying for it all. You see, 3 months of investigation had revealed something beautiful. Patricia Wilson lived entirely beyond her means. The designer clothes, the luxury car, the exclusive country club membership, all of it funded by credit cards that Mark had been secretly paying. And Mark had been paying those cards with money from our joint accounts. My money. When I'd closed those accounts last week, I'd effectively cut off their entire lifestyle. But they wouldn't realize it until the bills came due. The venue required full payment 72 hours in advance. The catering, the flowers, the string quartet Patricia had insisted on, everything was being charged to cards that were about to be declined. I spent that weekend in my downtown apartment, my real home that Mark had never even seen. From my floor-to-ceiling windows, I could watch the city below while I planned my next moves. Would you have had the courage to walk away? Because walking away from that restaurant was just step one of something much bigger. Monday morning brought the first wave of chaos. My private investigator called to confirm that Mark had been served with the criminal charges at his office: theft of marital assets, fraud, identity theft, the works. His co-workers got to watch him be escorted out by police. The humiliation he'd tried to orchestrate for me had become his reality instead. But the real masterpiece was still to come. Tuesday evening, I received a frantic call from Jessica. "Amanda, there's been some mistake with the party payments. All of Patricia's cards are being declined. The venue is threatening to cancel everything." "Oh no," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "That sounds terrible. Have they tried calling the credit card companies?" "They're saying the accounts are over limit, but that's impossible. Patricia never overspends." I almost laughed. Patricia never overspends because Mark had been covering her expenses for years. Mark, who was currently sitting in a holding cell waiting for his arraignment. "Well," I said carefully, "I'd love to help, but as you know, I'm going through a divorce. My finances are complicated right now." That was true, in a way, complicated for them. The party was scheduled for Saturday night. By Wednesday, the cancellations had started. The string quartet demanded payment up front or they'd walk. The florist required immediate settlement of their invoice. The catering company gave Patricia until Friday to pay, or they'd release the date to another client. This is where the story gets really interesting. See, Patricia Wilson had spent 3 years telling everyone who'd listen that I was a gold digger who'd trapped her son. She'd painted herself as the protective mother, saving her family from a manipulative woman who brought nothing to the table. Her social circle had eaten it up, especially the other country club wives who loved a good scandal. But now, faced with the collapse of her son's marriage and her own financial house of cards, Patricia did something desperate. She called me. "Amanda," she said when I answered the phone Thursday afternoon. Her voice was different, smaller somehow, lacking its usual imperious tone. "I think we need to talk." "Of course, Patricia. What can I do for you?" There was a long pause. I could picture her in that pristine living room of hers, surrounded by all the expensive things Mark's secret credit cards had bought her, finally understanding that her safety net was gone. "The party," she said finally. "There seems to be some confusion with the payments. I was wondering, as a member of the family, if you might consider—" "Consider what, Patricia?" Another pause, longer this time. "Helping with the costs. Just temporarily, of course, until we sort out this mix-up with the banks." The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. The woman who'd spent years calling me a gold digger was asking for my gold. The woman who just handed me divorce papers was begging me to fund her celebration party. "I see," I said slowly. "You want me to pay for Mark's freedom party." It's not that exactly. It's just that we've already committed to everything, and the venue has our deposit, and if we cancel now—" I let her ramble for a while about deposits and social embarrassment and how canceling would look to their friends. Finally, when she'd exhausted herself with excuses, I spoke. "Patricia, you gave me divorce papers for my birthday. You filmed my reaction for entertainment. You planned a party to celebrate getting rid of me. And now you want me to pay for it?" Silence. "But you know what?" I continued, my voice brightening. "I think I will help you. In fact, I insist on it. Don't cancel anything. Have the party exactly as planned. Spare no expense. I want everyone to be there." I could hear her confusion through the phone. You do?" "Absolutely. In fact, I'll take care of all the bills personally. Consider it my divorce gift to Mark. I want this to be a night no one will ever forget." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. They thought they'd won the lottery. They had no idea they'd just accepted an invitation to their own funeral. The most beautiful part of revenge isn't the moment of impact, it's the anticipation. For the next 2 days, I watched from a distance as Patricia scrambled to put together the party of the century. She upgraded the menu, added premium liquor packages, hired additional staff. Why be conservative when someone else was paying? She had no idea that I'd already spoken to the venue manager. The bills would be paid, but not until after a very specific conversation took place. A conversation that would happen in front of everyone who'd ever doubted me, dismissed me, or looked down on me as unworthy of the Wilson family name. Saturday night arrived with all the drama of a season finale. The venue was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, waiters in white gloves serving champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Patricia had invited over 100 people, and they'd all come to witness what they thought was my ultimate humiliation. Mark was there, fresh out on bail and looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. He kept checking his phone, probably fielding calls from lawyers and trying to figure out how his perfect plan had gone so wrong. Jessica worked the room like a political candidate, making sure everyone knew that Amanda the gold digger had finally been exposed and expelled from their perfect family. But the star of the show was Patricia herself, resplendent in a new designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, holding court near the bar and accepting congratulations on her son's liberation. She kept glancing toward the entrance, probably wondering if I'd actually show up. I let them enjoy themselves for exactly 1 hour. Long enough for the champagne to flow, for the speeches to begin, for everyone to settle into the narrative that this was Mark Wilson's triumphant return to bachelorhood, funded by his own mother's generosity and social connections. Then I walked in. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a simple black dress that had cost more than Patricia's entire party, but understated enough that she wouldn't immediately recognize the designer. My hair was up, my makeup flawless, and I wore the kind of confidence that money can't buy but financial security certainly helps. The room didn't go silent all at once. It was more like a wave, conversations stopping as people noticed me, whispers spreading as they tried to figure out why the ex-wife was crashing the celebration of her own divorce. Patricia saw me first. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, anger, panic, and finally something that looked almost like fear. Mark just stared, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. I walked straight to the bar, ordered a martini, and waited. Within 5 minutes, Patricia had worked up the courage to approach me. "Amanda," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic, "what are you doing here?" "Enjoying the party," I replied, taking a sip of my drink. "It's lovely, isn't it? You really outdid yourself with the decorations." This isn't appropriate. This is a private family celebration." "Oh, I know exactly what this is, Patricia." I turned to face her, noting how the conversations around us had quieted as people strained to listen. But since I'm paying for it, I thought I should at least make an appearance. That's when the venue manager appeared at my elbow, right on schedule. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, addressing me directly, "there's a matter regarding the payment that we need to discuss." The color drained from Patricia's face. Around us, I could feel the attention of the room focusing like a laser. These people loved drama almost as much as they loved exclusivity. "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Patricia, shall we handle this privately, or would you prefer to discuss it here?" She looked around the room at all the faces watching us, probably calculating which option would cause less social damage, but it was already too late for damage control. "The total for tonight's event," the manager continued, pulling out his tablet, "comes to $37,462. Will you be settling the account now, or should we proceed with the credit card on file?" I could have sworn I heard someone gasp. $37,000 for a single party. In a room full of wealthy people, that was still enough to make jaws drop. "The credit card on file," I said clearly, making sure my voice carried across the room. "Belongs to my mother-in-law, but as I explained to your accounting department, those cards were all canceled last week due to fraudulent activity." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ice clinking in someone's drink 3 tables away. "However," I continued, reaching into my purse, "I'm happy to take care of it." I pulled out my Black American Express card, the one with no spending limit that most people only saw in movies. Consider it a divorce gift. That's when the real show began. I paid their $37,000 bill with a smile that could have lit up the entire venue. The Black American Express card slid through the reader like butter, and I watched Patricia's face crumble as the transaction approved. Around us, the party guests had formed an impromptu audience, their champagne glasses forgotten as they witnessed what was clearly the most expensive public humiliation in recent memory. "There," I said, tucking the card back into my purse, "all settled. Please make sure the staff gets a generous tip. They've done exceptional work tonight." Mark finally found his voice. "Amanda, what the hell is going on? Where did you get that kind of money?" That's when I started laughing. Not the polite chuckle I'd perfected during 3 years of Wilson family dinners, but genuine, from-the-belly laughter that made several people step back. Have you ever watched someone's entire worldview collapse in real time? Because that's exactly what was happening to my ex-husband. "Oh, Mark," I said, wiping a tear from my eye, "you really have no idea who you married, do you?" I turned to address the room, my voice carrying easily in the crystal-clear acoustics of the venue. These people had come for a show, and I was about to give them one they'd never forget. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all enjoying Patricia's celebration of my divorce. It's quite an honor to be here tonight, especially since this party represents everything the Wilson family believed about me." I took a sip of my martini, letting the moment build. They thought I was a gold digger who trapped their precious son. They thought I brought nothing to the marriage except debt and desperation. I could see people pulling out their phones now, recording. Good. I wanted this to go viral. "But here's the thing about assumptions," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "They make an ass out of you and, well, just you." A few people chuckled nervously. For 3 years, I let them believe I was Amanda Wilson, struggling waitress turned housewife. What they didn't know was that I'm Amanda Chen. I paused, watching the recognition dawn on a few faces in the crowd. In tech circles, in business circles, that name meant something. "You know Amanda Chen, the one who sold her artificial intelligence startup to Microsoft for $42 million when she was 28? The silence was deafening. I could see phones lighting up as people frantically Googled my name, probably pulling up Forbes articles and TechCrunch interviews from 5 years ago. Mark's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the room frozen. "That's impossible," Patricia whispered, but her voice carried in the silence. "You're a waitress. You worked at that diner when Mark met you." "I volunteered at a community kitchen," I corrected gently. "Giving back, you might say. Mark assumed I worked there because he couldn't imagine a millionaire serving soup to homeless people for free." I turned to look at him directly. "You never asked about my background, remember? You were so charmed by what you thought was my simple life that you never wondered why I had no college debt, no car payments, no financial stress at all." Jessica, who'd been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "But the apartment you lived in when you met Mark, it was tiny." "Studio apartments in downtown Seattle run about $4,000 a month," I replied. "That tiny space had a view of Elliott Bay and cost more than most people's mortgages. But you're right, it was small. I like efficiency." I could see the mental calculations happening across multiple faces. If I'd had this money all along, then everything they thought they knew about our marriage was wrong. "So the house," Mark started, his voice trailing off. "Mine. Bought with cash. Deed in my name only. I let you believe we owned it together because I wanted to see if you'd love me without knowing about my money." I smiled at him, and it wasn't a kind smile. "Turns out you chose option 3, use me while planning to destroy me." That's when my lawyer appeared, right on schedule, walking through the venue doors like he owned the place. David Martinez was worth every penny of his $1,000 hourly rate, not just for his legal skills, but for his sense of dramatic timing. "Mrs. Chen," he said, approaching our little group with a briefcase in hand, "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, David. Perfect timing, actually." I turned back to the crowd. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet David Martinez, senior partner at Martinez, Goldman and Associates. He's been handling some paperwork for me." David opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mrs. Chen, the documents you requested are all prepared. The criminal charges against Mr. Wilson have been filed and served. The asset recovery claim has been approved by the courts, and the restraining orders are ready for your signature." I could hear someone's sharp intake of breath, but I couldn't tell who. "Criminal charges?" Mark's voice cracked on the words. "Identity theft, fraud, embezzlement. David recited like he was reading a grocery list. Using your wife's credit accounts to fund an extramarital affair, transferring marital assets without consent, and my personal favorite, attempting to defraud someone worth $42 million. He looked up from his papers. The district attorney was particularly interested in that last one. Patricia had gone so pale I was worried she might faint. This is ridiculous. Mark would never steal from me, I interrupted. Oh, but he did. $63,000 funneled to his girlfriend Sarah over the past 8 months. Hotel rooms, jewelry, even a down payment on a condo they were planning to share after our divorce. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a photo. Here's the bank transfer from last Tuesday. Same day he gave me those divorce papers, actually. I held up the screen so everyone could see the transaction details. Mark's name, Sarah's account number, $5,000 with the memo line reading, "For our future." You were planning to divorce me anyway, I continued, putting my phone away. The least you could have done was use your own money to fund your affair. Mark was starting to look genuinely panicked now. Amanda, wait. We can work this out. The money, the charges, it's all a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked, genuinely curious. Which part? The part where you stole from me, or the part where you filmed my humiliation for entertainment? That's when the private investigator I'd hired walked in. Marcus Webb looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a PI. Tall, graying at the temples, and carrying himself with the kind of confidence that comes from 20 years of police work. He nodded to David, then approached our group. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice carrying just enough authority to make everyone pay attention. "I have those surveillance photos you requested." He handed me a manila envelope, thick with prints. I opened it and pulled out the top photo, a crystal-clear shot of Mark and Sarah entering a hotel room, timestamp showing last Wednesday afternoon. "This was taken the same day you handed me divorce papers," I said, holding the photo up for everyone to see, "just so we're clear on the timeline of your moral awakening." I flipped to the next photo, Mark's hands on Sarah's face as they kissed in the hotel parking lot, then another, the two of them shopping for furniture at a high-end store, using what I now knew was my credit card. 47 photos total, I announced to the room, dating back 8 months. Should I keep going, or have we seen enough? Mark lunged for the photos, but Marcus stepped smoothly between us. 20 years of police work had given him reflexes that made Mark's desperate grab look pathetic. "I wouldn't," Marcus said mildly. "These are evidence in an ongoing criminal investigation." That's when the room exploded into whispers. Criminal investigation. Evidence. These words had a way of sobering up even the most champagne-soaked party guests. Patricia finally found her voice again. "This is all very dramatic, Amanda, but it doesn't change the fact that you signed those divorce papers. The marriage is over." I smiled at her, and this time it was almost affectionate. "Oh, Patricia, you're absolutely right. The marriage is over. But those papers you had Mark serve me, they weren't the real divorce filing." I nodded to David, who pulled out another set of documents. "The actual divorce papers were filed by my attorney 6 weeks ago," I continued. "Irreconcilable differences, with a complete asset inventory that accurately reflects my net worth." I accepted the papers from David and held them up. These papers establish that all marital assets remain with their original owner, me, and that Mark Wilson leaves the marriage with exactly what he brought into it. "Which was what?" someone in the crowd called out. I pretended to think about it. "About $14,000 in student loan debt and a Honda Civic with a failing transmission." The laughter that rippled through the room wasn't kind. These people could smell blood in the water, and 3 years of Patricia's social dominance had made her plenty of enemies who were enjoying her downfall. "But don't worry," I added, "I'm not completely heartless. Mark can keep the car." That's when Mark finally snapped. "You can't do this. I have rights. We were married for 3 years." "And during those 3 years, you contributed what exactly?" I asked. "Your job at the insurance agency pays $45,000 a year. My investments alone generate more than that per month. The house we lived in, I bought it. The cars we drove, I leased them. The vacations we took, I paid for them. Even the engagement ring you gave me was purchased with a credit card that I was secretly paying off. I turned to address the crowd again. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the world's most expensive-kept man. 3 years of luxury living, all funded by the woman he was secretly planning to divorce and destroy. Jessica found her voice at last. You're lying. Mark has a good job. He contributes to this family. Does he? I asked. Marcus, would you mind sharing what your background check revealed about Mark's employment? Marcus pulled out a tablet and swiped to the right screen. Mr. Wilson has been on probation at Pacific Northwest Insurance for the past 18 months due to performance issues. His salary was reduced by 15% last year, and he's currently being investigated for filing false expense reports. The hits just kept coming. I watched Mark's face cycle through denial, anger, and finally a kind of desperate resignation as his entire life unraveled in front of his social circle. But here's the really beautiful part, I continued. The divorce papers you signed tonight weren't the ones Patricia gave me. Those were just theater. The real papers, the ones that matter legally, give you nothing. No house, no alimony, no shared assets, just your freedom and your debt. I could see the exact moment when Mark realized what had happened. His face went white, then gray, then an interesting shade of green. You knew, he whispered. You knew all along. I found your lawyer's business card 3 months ago, I confirmed, hidden in your wallet like some kind of treasure map to my destruction. Did you really think I'd just sit there and let you destroy me? Patricia was looking around the room desperately, probably trying to figure out how to salvage something from this social catastrophe. This is harassment, she declared. Public humiliation. We'll sue for defamation. David looked up from his papers, almost bored. Mrs. Wilson, everything your daughter-in-law has said tonight is documented fact. Bank records, surveillance photos, court filings, all public record. You can't defame someone with the truth. Besides, I added, you filmed my reaction to your divorce papers for entertainment. I'm just returning the favor. That's when the venue manager approached again, this time looking uncomfortable. Excuse me, Mrs. Chen. There's been a development with the Wilson party account. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? It seems someone attempted to dispute the charges after you'd already paid them. The credit card company has frozen the account pending an investigation into potential fraud. I turned to look at Patricia, who was now the color of old newspaper. You tried to dispute the charges after I'd already paid them? That is, there must be some mistake. No mistake, the manager continued. The cardholder, Mrs. Patricia Wilson, called our billing department 20 minutes ago claiming the charges were unauthorized. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Patricia had tried to scam me even after I'd saved her from financial ruin. Well, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I guess that settles the question of character once and for all. I finished my martini and set the glass down on the nearest table. Around us, the party guests were already pulling out their phones, no doubt preparing to spread this story across every social media platform and country club gossip network in the city. Thank you all for coming tonight, I announced. It's been educational. Patricia, Mark, Jessica, thank you for the lovely evening. Consider your bill paid and your characters revealed. I started toward the exit, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Mark, your criminal trial starts in 6 weeks. I'll be there to testify about every penny you stole. Dress nicely. Orange really isn't your color. As I walked toward the door, I could hear the explosion of conversation behind me. 3 years of careful social positioning destroyed in one evening. 3 years of living off my money while planning my destruction, exposed for everyone to see. But I wasn't done yet. 1 year later, I stood in the penthouse office of Chen Innovations. The new company I'd built from scratch after my divorce became final. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Seattle skyline stretching out below me, and beyond that, the sound glittering in the afternoon sun. My assistant knocked and entered. "Mrs. Chen, your 3 o'clock is here." "Send her in, please." The woman who walked into my office was in her early 30s, well-dressed but with the kind of tension around her eyes that spoke of recent trauma. She carried herself like someone who'd been broken but was determined not to show it. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Rebecca Martinez. Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chairs arranged in front of my desk. "Please, call me Amanda, and thank you for coming. I read your email, and I think I can help." Rebecca sat down carefully, clutching a folder against her chest. "I don't know if you remember, but I was at that party last year, the one where you exposed my ex-husband's criminal behavior in front of 100 people," I supplied with a smile. "Yes, I remember. You were there with the Patterson family, I think." She nodded. "My husband's business partners. We've been married 5 years, and I just found out he's been planning to divorce me. He thinks I don't know about the affair, about the money he's been hiding, about the lawyer he's hired." Her voice cracked slightly. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said firmly. "You're trusting. There's a difference." I stood and walked around my desk to sit in the chair beside her rather than across from her. "Tell me what you've discovered." For the next hour, Rebecca laid out a story that was depressingly familiar. A husband who'd grown distant, financial irregularities she'd noticed but dismissed, a discovery that shattered everything she thought she knew about her marriage. "The thing is," she said finally, "I don't have your resources. I'm not secretly rich. I'm just a kindergarten teacher who trusted the wrong man." "Rebecca," I said, leaning forward, "what if I told you that resources aren't just about money? What if I told you that intelligence, preparation, and the right allies can be just as powerful as a bank account?" I opened my laptop and pulled up a document I'd been working on for months. 6 months ago, I started something called the Phoenix Foundation. We provide legal support, private investigation services, and financial planning for women who've been betrayed by their spouses. Her eyes widened. "Like a charity?" "Like justice," I corrected. "We have a team of lawyers, investigators, and financial advisors who specialize in high-conflict divorces, women who've been underestimated, dismissed, or targeted for destruction." I pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "We don't just help women survive divorce, we help them win." Rebecca stared at the card like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Why would you do this? Why help strangers?" I thought about that question for a moment, looking out at the city below. Because Mark Wilson wasn't the first man to underestimate me, and he won't be the last. Because Patricia Wilson wasn't the first mother-in-law to treat her daughter-in-law like hired help. Because this story happens every day, and most women don't have $42 million to fall back on. I turned back to her. And because the best revenge isn't just living well, it's making sure other women get the chance to live well, too. That afternoon, after Rebecca left with a comprehensive legal strategy and a team of professionals at her disposal, I sat in my office thinking about the past year. Mark's criminal trial had resulted in a conviction and 18 months in federal prison. Patricia had been forced to sell her house to pay legal bills. Jessica had stopped speaking to me entirely, which honestly felt like a gift. But more importantly, the Phoenix Foundation had helped 47 women navigate high-conflict divorces. We'd recovered over $12 million in hidden assets. We'd exposed 17 affairs, uncovered 23 cases of financial fraud, and helped secure protective orders for women whose husbands had become violent when their secret lives were exposed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the private investigator who'd become our foundation's director of investigations. "Rebecca Martinez's case is already paying dividends. Husband's been embezzling from his company for 2 years. Federal prosecutors are interested." I smiled and typed back, "Document everything. And Marcus? Make sure she gets the house. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that night in the restaurant, when Patricia handed me divorce papers wrapped in a bow. They'd tried to destroy me because they thought I was weak. They'd underestimated me because they couldn't see past their own assumptions. They'd filmed my reaction because they wanted to capture my humiliation. Instead, they'd created the origin story for something much bigger than they could have imagined. My assistant knocked again. "Mrs. Chen, your 6 o'clock is here. The documentary filmmaker?" "Perfect. Send her in." The woman who entered was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 20s, with the kind of intense energy that marked her as someone with a story to tell. "Amanda Chen," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Kim from Chronicle Films. Thank you for agreeing to this interview." As we shook hands, I thought about how far we'd all come. "Thank you for wanting to tell this story. I think it's important for women to know that divorce papers wrapped in a bow don't have to be the end of their story." "Actually," Sarah said, setting up her camera, "I think it might be the beginning of a much better one." She was right. The best revenge really was a life well lived, especially when that life included making sure other women got the same chance at justice. Some gifts, I'd learned, really do change your life forever, even divorce papers.